wake up and I see this, or last night I go to bed and I see this thing about Jorge Glass, who was the former vice president of Mexico, and what's going on there. Oh boy, where is he? He's in Ecuador. So what happened? And by the way, what's his name? Richard Medhurst also covered this really well. You can check out his video on this, but I wanted to go through this myself, to learn it as much as to go through Esha's thing and give her props. By the way, Esha gives us great referrals both on INN Stack, on Substack, as well as Indie Media Today. So big love for Esha. So she says Mexico just ended diplomatic relations with Ecuador after Ecuador stormed into the Mexican embassy to arrest the former vice president of Mexico, Jorge Glass, who was seeking asylum there. The story is interesting, and there is a deep rabbit hole. Right, so first thing is you've got AMLO, right, and we can translate this post. Alicia Baracena, our Secretary of Foreign Affairs, has just informed me that police from Ecuador forcibly entered our embassy and detained the former vice president of that country, who was a refugee and processing asylum due to the persecution and harassment that he faces. This is a flagrant violation of international law and the sovereignty of Mexico, correct? Which is why I've instructed our chancellor to issue a statement regarding this authoritarian act, proceed legally, and immediately declare the suspension of diplomatic relations with the government of Mexico. Wow. And Ecuador, with the government of Ecuador, and that's AMLO saying that. So, in 2017, Ecuadorian VP Jorge Glass was sentenced of corruption for alleged bribes involving the Brazilian corporation Odebrecht. Remember that name because it becomes important. Right? Everybody remember Odebrecht? Right? That was a Brazilian company where the vice president, right, got sentenced to 6 years in jail. Not long before, Odebrecht again was implicated in the fake corruption scandal involving Lula, the car wash. Remember that? Which was just a judicial coup.
Yep.
Right?
Okay.
So, as Brazil Wire explains, the Odebrecht scandal seems to selectively target only people who are hostile to U.S. interests in Latin America. In 2016, Odebrecht was fined by the DOJ for an alleged bribery scheme, but in exchange for leniency, they had to cooperate with all DOJ-related investigations. They pay at least $3.5 billion in global penalties to resolve the largest foreign bribery case in history. Okay? As Brazil Wire explains, under the FCA, the U.S. has made a deal with many countries, and anytime dollars are used in a transaction, the DOJ can support an investigation. So this was again back in 2014. Operation Car Wash is a joint operation between the DOJ, FBI, SEC, a local Brazilian public prosecutor's office in Curitiba, and the Brazilian Federal Police. But this goes back. And what ended up happening was using the Foreign Corrupt Powers Act as justification, the DOJ-led team announces that it's targeting Petrobras, which is the oil company in Brazil, and several of Brazil's largest companies, such as Odebrecht and Embraer, who's a jet maker. The team begins a series of leaks to the media seeking to associate Dilma Rousseff's name with the corruption in Petrobras. Who's Dilma Rousseff? They talk about them up above, right? During our next 4 years, top DOJ officials make repeated visits to Curitiba. That's weird, right? Now, the following leftist politicians were brought down with the only evidence against them being documents from Odebrecht saying that they accepted bribes. That's weird, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we find out that Odebrecht itself was corrupt as fuck. So anything that they were indicted for being involved with, chances are they're lying about. right? Here's Brazilian Supreme Court annulling the evidence against the president, okay? Having been fabricated, manipulated, and directed, President Correa said. The case of this politician is not isolated. For the last 2 decades, Latin American leftist leaders have been persecuted through a lawfare that uses the media and justice system to drive them out of political life. They allegedly did this to Bolsonaro. This is what they're trying to do to Trump.
Yeah.
Right? This happened with Cristina Fernandez Kirchner in Argentina and Lula in Brazil. So the Odebrecht case against Jorge Glass was based on false testimony of an admittedly corrupt Conscienciao Santos, as well as evidence presented in the Lava Jato case in Brazil. Again, a lot has turned out that the stuff that was presented in Lava Jato was exactly the opposite of what they had sold it as. Brazilian justice, therefore, has just annulled the evidence against Jorge, including Santos's testimony for having been fabricated, manipulated, and directed. This farce is over, although he's continuously been targeted in a witch hunt by Ecuador's right-wing regime. So he moved, or he's been the VP. He's no longer the VP. In December, he asked for political asylum in Mexico. And he was going into the embassy, and he was in the embassy seeking asylum. Mexico had granted him asylum earlier this week. All right, so former VP arrested of corruption, now exonerated from that corruption, but worried for his life because the people that indicted him are now threatening his life, and he's given asylum by Mexico and in the Mexican embassy. Climate of repression is harsh. Remember that the only evidence against Jorge Glass is a spreadsheet from Odebrecht, which has been found to be as guilty and corrupt as fuck.
Spreadsheets.
Right? So what happened?
Yep.
I'm not thrilled that this comes from Tanky Punk, but they have some good receipts here. Reading a couple things that Esha linked related to Jorge Glass being essentially kidnapped from Ecuador's embassy in Mexico. The whole thing is part of a longer-term bit of geopoliticking by the USA in Latin America to overturn what is left of the pink tide of the early 2000s. And that includes, right? It's common knowledge that CIA gave bags of money away to government officials in Afghanistan. So why would the Justice Department, the SEC, and the FBI be so worried about corruption in Latin America that the U.S. government will prioritize the issue in the 2017 National Security Strategy? It was weird. In Brazil, where a joint investigation with those agencies and federal police, public prosecutors, resulted in one indirect impeachment and the probable imprisonment of ex-President Lula, who lifted $36 million above the poverty line for reforms to an apartment, right? They promised him, they claim that he had accepted an apartment as a gift, but he never had. He had never set foot in there, and he had never accepted it. For reforms to an apartment that the prosecutors have been unable to prove that he ever owned or set foot in, people are beginning to wonder if Odebrecht is being used as a Trojan horse by the U.S. government to commit lawfare attacks against politicians who are not fully aligned with their geopolitical objectives. The U.S. would never do that, right?
You ever wonder why the biggest condom size is not Trojan horses? You know? Like they went with Magnum. I feel like they missed out.
That's gross.
You know?
As the U.S. government lines its pockets with fines collected during the Lava Jato, all right, I would like to take a look at which Latin American leaders have been arrested and accused and speculate as to why the U.S. government may not consider them to be allies. And here they are. Here it is. The way they're doing this is through an alleged scandal involving Odebrecht, which conveniently ensnares officials from left-leaning governments across the region. Except from what I understand, the evidence for corruption here is very limited. So who are these people? Here's the ex-president of Chile, plea bargain testimony by a corrupt businessman in exchange for a sentence reduction results in charges against her for receiving illegal campaign contributions from OAS Construction Company, Odebrecht. Here's again Lula with the apartment. Corrupt Odebrecht businessman who had his sentence reduced after agreeing to change his testimony to implicate Lula. Then you had Dilma Rousseff, who's the ex-president of Brazil, right? She's also widely and erroneously associated with Lava Jato corruption in the Anglo media, impeached and later declared innocent for bookkeeping infractions called fiscal peddling. So all these people didn't do anything, but they were framed, set up, and taken down. Here's the ex-president of Peru, Humala, another one. Right, so that's what they're saying here. And it's not just those four. Here we go some more. Here's Alejandro Toledo, who's the ex-president of Peru. Alejandro. Right? Then you've got Mauricio Funes from El Salvador. Again, accused of money laundering in the Lava Jato in the Lava Jato operation. Currently living in exile in Nicaragua. And for every one of these, there's a reason why the U.S. has beef with them and wanted to see them out. Kirshner, that's interesting. And this goes.
Argentina would have more beef. Argentina agriculture joke.
Absolutely wonderful beef from Argentina. Anyway.
Argentina.
Yes. Again, why the U.S. doesn't like him. He was targeted because he was part of a socialist government that the U.S. has been trying to overthrow since 2010. Ecuador is one of Venezuela's most important and vocal allies. Could the U.S. have done this to prevent him from running for president, which he likely would have at some point?
Could they? Would they? Have they done things like that before? Absolutely.
And this thread goes deep. You know? Here, the recent reoccupation of Haiti, and we'll talk about Haiti in a little bit, is the military imposition of a plan. Again, this is from 2022. Developing long-term political economic relations with nations in U.S.-EU sphere of influence. All right, so here's Glass was seeking asylum in Mexico, and AMLO had granted it just before they violated Mexico's sovereignty to force Glass back into custody. AMLO had previously sheltered Evo Morales, who was from Bolivia, right? And there's AMLO and Biden just a couple of weeks ago. But there's video of the ambassador to Mexico screaming about this, and he's apoplectic.
Yep. Apoplectic.
I love that word.
Using the schmancy words.
So here's Richard's thread about it. And again, go follow Richard Medhurst. Watch his video on this too if you're interested in more stuff. Indie Media Award honoree. All right, insane violation of international law and the Vienna Convention. This is the new lawless standard set when Israel bombs Iran's embassy and the world is silent. Allegedly. I don't think they've actually claimed responsibility for that yet.
Wake up, asshole.
Yeah, that guy. So, diplomatic personnel and premises, which is the embassy, consulate, and residence, are inviolable. No one can enter without permission. A Mexican embassy is officially Mexican soil. The Ecuadorian police had no right to be there. Correct.
Their country of origin soil, like the Iranian one.
So now, what Richard is saying is that now that an embassy has been bombed, all bets are off, and people are realizing that there's no liability or accountability for doing anything if you are friendly to the U.S., so this is what they pulled. Now,
other than just start World War III.
Right. This is the thing that I wanted to bring for Richard that I didn't see anybody else note. Worth noting that Ecuador also handed Julian Assange over to London police and the U.S. in exchange for a nice IMF loan. They revoked his political asylum and arbitrarily revoked his citizenship. In that case, however, police were granted permission to enter the Ecuadorian embassy. Here, they were not.
French fried when he should have pizza.
Yeah, you're going to have a bad time. He said he's also getting reports that several Mexican diplomats and embassy staff were injured in this illegal attack by Ecuadorian forces. I don't have that for sure. That's reported by Richard, but I don't have that confirmed. So that's bad.
That is bad.
Bad is bad. And we somehow managed to continue to have a stream. I don't know how, but we have one. Thank you to everyone who actually is here. And all right, so we got 23 people. All right, cool, folks. All right, we are going to do one more story, and then we'll try to get to boats and see if that's going to work. Oh, before we do, let me put this up real quick. If you are of means and you do like what you are seeing and you don't really see that in too many other places, drop us a couple of bucks. You can do that here. Patreon, Substack, Rumble. Easiest, fastest way is via Cash App. We're also over on the Rockfin, rockfin.com/INDLeftNews or /INN. We're on both networks. At least we may be. I don't know what we're live with right now. But you can drop us some cash over there if you are so inclined, and we really appreciate it. But Patreon subscription, awesome. Cash App, great. Of course, we love our Substack people.